It all began in 1996. It was called the North Central Street Culture Project, a summer and arts program run through the North Central Community Association. But funding was hard to come by, so in 1998, Kim Sutherland made a tough call. He established a volunteer board and created the nonprofit we know and love as Street Culture Project.
And now they're calling us 4 years later to find out how we do what we do. Because we affect so many people over an extended period of time, and we are successful in the community, and we are grassroots, and we are built and staffed by those we serve, I'm the only one that began as a non-participant to the process. When people ask me about why I did it, why I started the Street Culture Project after the North Central Street Culture Project, it was a combination of things. The kids I was working with at Dale's house during my day job as a cook were sort of the grown-up version of who I was seeing in the inner city area that were coming into the Albert Scott every day just for after-school programming. And I realized that this was an underserved community of kids, and more than that, they were one day going to be contributors to our community and taxpayers.
Okay, well, I started with street culture in May 1st of 99. I had a 4.5-year-old daughter with me, and I was a single mom, and I came to street culture through a volunteer experience to start with. Back then, what we needed to do was be able to create our own income, our own wage, by bringing more new income into the agency. You just didn't have a position. There just wasn't the money to be able to do that.
And we just toured the province on truly a wing and a prayer, going from campsite to campsite and trading our face painting services for access into a park or for the passes to get our camping each night. And then by day we would spend hours on the beach doing puppet shows or face painting the public with a donation bin out. Those early years are what taught us the foundation of the organization didn't have to be a healthy budget, it had to be a willing team.
The bulk of the revenue for the agency was made through face painting, public speaking engagements, puppet shows, and catering. Art was always a foundation of engagement with youth and continued to be the cornerstone of Street Culture's programming.
I had this opportunity from Street Culture. I really didn't know much about it going in. I quickly got to engage with youth at risk that had similarities to me and interests around music and arts and that sort of thing in high school that I don't think there was a lot of opportunities for that sort of community outreach at the time. Lots of sports programs, that sort of thing, but for those kids that you'd find maybe in Vic Park hanging out, there wasn't a lot of those outlets. And so it was a really cool opportunity because I got to get paid to basically do something that I loved, and I got to engage with really awesome people.
See, the premise of street culture has always been building relationships. It's been the #1 most important factor in street culture's operations. And undoubtedly, it makes perfect sense. The only way you're going to impact somebody is if you have a relationship with them. Years later, I look back and it's like, wow, I was a participant that whole time, and I had a bunch of growing to do myself before I could really give what I had learned,
I quickly realized working at Street Culture that the activity itself, even though that's what attracted me to the job, it was the process of engagement for the youth that was really the important part. So the activity of curating a mural was really awesome, and it was great because it gave those kids lots of ownership over the community. It get them to even be recognized and paid for something that they love to do. But the real gold and magic was those 8-hour days you got to spend basically one-on-one, two-on-one with those youth, just connecting, discussing life and realities, and connecting on that human level, providing some positive mentorship, and that's what it was all about at the time.
The big break came in 2004. The project moved to the YMCA Tuck Shop, beginning a 6-year run of food service to the public.
Another pivotal moment in the history of this agency was when we became real partners of the YMCA, and we ran their cafe for about 6 years.
I remember my first days at the cafe. I had come over from the Hotel Saskatchewan as the outlets manager, and I was going to revolutionize the food service there. There was all this chaos and craziness going on. I'm like, I'm going to get these guys in line, and I figured out quite quickly that nobody wanted to hang out with me. Kim let me struggle for the first few days, and he whispered in my ear one day and told me the secret. He said, "Go wash the dishes." When I started to do that, all of a sudden I had one kid beside me, and then two, and then four, and I started to form trusting relationships. One of the things I learned early on was it wasn't about teaching them to be a waiter or a waitress or a good cook or dishwasher. A lot of these kids lack the basic life skills that you would gain growing up in a normal, healthy, familial setting. We often ask ourselves, what would a healthy parent do? We had to teach them things like good hygiene, budgeting, how to show up to work on time. You know, we give these guys and girls paychecks, and sometimes they disappear for 3 or 4 weeks, and then they come back and we'd have to consolidate and start again. And street culture was a really healthy, safe environment for them to do that. They always felt welcome back.
The Ministry of Justice noticed this was working. They shoulder-tapped the project, ultimately offering a stable contract in the Regina Connected Youth Program.
Corrections had recognized some of the good work that we were doing in the community and thought maybe they would take a chance on us, which was really cool because, like I said, we probably weren't the safest agency at the time to maybe take a chance on. That was our first introduction to the whole structure of government relations and sort of large grants and outcomes measurements, and being really purposeful in what we were kind of doing and not just always flying around by the seat of our pants.
But safe housing for these kids was still an issue, and it was one the project began to tackle by creating a plan for a housing continuum.
Around the same time that we were working with Justice, the Ministry of Social Services asked us if we could do some pilot projects for some housing programs, and that's where, named after Mark Docherty, Doc's House opened. Followed quickly by Wendy's, and then after our third longest term board member, we opened Downtown Brown's Emergency Shelter. It wasn't just the housing that made us so well known. The team that worked with those kids in the houses started to see measurable outcomes that hadn't been seen before. It was a place for kids to belong, to grow from, to work with great adults in, and to move on in life, get their education, get a job, and get paying taxes.
In 2012, the staffing complement had grown from 25 core staff to 50, with the agency now operating in 4 locations throughout the city. Street culture was no longer a complementary service, but an essential part of Regina's community outreach.
We had Doc's and Wendy's going, then we had the shelter, and then we opened Greta Lynn's Inn, or Glyn as we affectionately call it today, the old detox center on Victoria and Retallick. It was a necessity because the building simply couldn't handle the expansion in our staff that happened between when we achieved the tender and when we opened the shelter. We had grown again as an organization, so we had to get additional office space, and Glyn served us very well in that regard.
In about 2012 to 2014, we went through another unprecedented expansion. We started our mentorship program. Our housing programs were taking off. We had RCY, which had expanded into RCY2 as a pilot project. We had our Soup in the Park program, outreach services, emergency response. All of that time and through all of that expansion, there was one thing that was super important, and that was the culture of the agency.
And it's there that we started to reflect as a team and start to understand what it was about street culture that made the difference. And it was those early pioneers, those early kids who came and asked to help out that made the difference. They started the ball moving around the concept of culture. And the culture isn't just the culture of youth, it's the culture of how to engage youth. Because as we move staff around the agency, they carry the culture with them. So whether we're in one location or 10 or 15, the culture is entrenched in the heart of the people that work as part of our team.